So thanks to you, thanks to Anacon for this opportunity to present our views about LSA, a concept that we have pushed years ago together with our Portuguese friends. LSA is important for us. So we had one trial that was mentioned earlier to demonstrate the feasibility of LSA concept in France, which was successful. It was using the solution of a company called Red Technology, a small company also. And happily, after these say demonstrations, we were not really in a position to open the band to mobile network operator. The incumbent having preemptions rights would have been, in our case, in case of France, the Department of Defense. And they were at the time quite eager to implement LSA as a way to have a more spectrum efficient solutions. Unhappily, operators were too hesitant, and that's echoing what Michael has just mentioned. As a result, the use of defense in this frequency band has quite expanded over the last few years, and it's now much more difficult for them to accept the LSA sharing scheme. There's a lot of different usage now. It's complicating things. So really on that, operators have missed in France an opportunity to access the 2.3 gigahertz. And I think operators, maybe to respond to Michael, would now understand that they should avoid losing this kind of opportunity. From a larger perspective, we observe that dynamic spectrum sharing between mobile and other spectrum users is developing in certain areas of the world, like in the United States. I think there was a slide from Nokia on that, but not so much in Europe. That's correct. And spectrum scarcity in all range of spectrums, the growing demand for mobile traffic, for 5G, 6G, the importance of spectrum for all users, and not only 5G and 6G operators, make spectrum sharing the only viable solution in the long run. We are really persuaded about that in ANFR and the French agency. So we have to foster spectrum sharing, and in particular dynamic spectrum sharing, using the fact that many spectrum usage needs spectrum availability, even if they're not using the spectrum everywhere, every time. Typically, the video links, the PMSC in Portugal, or the defense user in France in the 2.3 gigahertz band. So question is why Europe is not upfront in terms of dynamic spectrum sharing? I think one of the reasons is that dynamic spectrum sharing is still something which is new. There's a big step the first time to implement new regulations, new players. If you manage database, if you have as a kind of device, the LSA Warner in the Portuguese experience. But when you have done it once, it's probably easier to do it a second time, a third time, and that can be clearly seen in the US situations. We have to prime the pump, in fact. The European Commission and Estis mentioned that there will be soon an opinion of the RSPG, which is supporting that. So the need to encourage the development of initial proof of concept system in certain bands, and to devise all those systems can be reused and considered for sharing solutions in other frequency band. So what has been done by ANACOM is really extremely important, and that has to be shared with all member states within Europe. And another reason why we are lagging behind the United States here is that even if we have one single market, we have still a lot of diversity in terms of incumbent users, and that's the demonstration in 2.3 gigahertz that was pointed out by the ANACOM presentation. So it's not so easy to harmonize the sharing framework. There's a lot of different kind of sharing framework to be implemented. That was also pointed by the opinion, which will be published soon. So what we need certainly at the European level is to develop harmonized standards and regulatory deliverables which would support administrations in implementing specific sharing coexistence solutions. So we need some bricks in terms of standards and regulation that can be used to build the sharing framework. So the work in ETSI, in TCRS is essential for that. And once again, I'm sure operator now should be eager to have this kind of development. Also, and that's not really concerning LSA, it's more for unlicensed usage, which is also important for dynamic spectrum sharing. There's the issue of confidence, taking into the bad experience of dynamic frequency selection in the 5 GHz range, the DFS, where we still have in Europe a lot of methodological radars interfered because of the difficulty in ensuring the implementation of DFS in all devices. And on that, the future our SPG opinion is really to recommend the member state to strengthen the market surveillance to ensure that equipments are well compliant with essential requirements. So there's still a lot of work to progress on dynamic spectrum sharing in Europe and to be at the level of the United States in few years. But clearly, there's a lot of frequency band in which there will be interest for this discussion. First one is the 5.8 gigahertz band, where some countries want to introduce radio LAN, some countries doesn't want to introduce radio LAN, some countries would like radio LAN, but they want to protect specific area to protect tolling systems which are using the same frequency band. So we need some dynamic frequency sharing here. Also in the 3842 gigahertz band, where it is envisaged to introduce low, medium power verticals to achieve some local 5G coverage and sharing with FSS stations, which are, say, the primary incumbent in this frequency band. Another example that has been mentioned by Jaime as activity in CPT is the possibility of implementing some dynamic sharing solution between FSS, fixed satellite service, and fixed service in the 28 gigahertz band. So all that is practical, concrete example of bands where we need to implement dynamic sharing, where we need to implement lessons from LSA experiment, in particular the one from ANACOM, and that certainly will help CPT and HC in progressing in dynamic sharing implementation. So thanks for listening, and looking forward for the discussion just after that. Thank you.